Blog Talk Radio.
Carol the Coach. Sex, love, and relationships. We talk about it here.
Carol the Coach. Compassion with contemporary relevance.
I am a psychotherapist. I can be your personal life coach, and I can help you with your issues. There are no problems too small or too big. You can talk about anything.
Speaker, columnist, radio TV host, and commentator. Carol the Coach brings messages of wellness and empowerment within reach of everyday people every day.
Almost 5 years ago, I lost my soulmate in an accident. He was killed in a plane crash. Life just, for me, has seemed to stop.
There are groups all over the city. I teach one. It is a specific way to start thinking so that you shift how you see the world, which then shifts your energy, and then you feel better and you actually see things differently.
Carol the Coach, always available too at carolthecoach.com.
Now I've got Russell on the line.
I'm 47 years old. I'm a truck driver. I'm married. I have a wife in San Francisco.
Okay.
I haven't been home in 6 months. My thing is, I don't know if I have a sex addiction or what the problem is. Why do I want what I can't have? And as soon as I can have it, I don't want it anymore.
You're right on target when you say, I don't know if I have a sexual addiction. Well, guess what? Yes, you do. And you know what? That's my specialty, Russell, so you're at the right place. Continue.
I meet women online, and I'm in a different part of the country. I travel all 48 states, so I love sex.
I hear self-esteem issues. You never felt good enough, and you didn't feel like you were getting what you should have then, and you're reenacting that now. Do you want to change that about yourself?
Hi there, I am Carol Jurgensen-Sheets, and this is the show on sexual addiction. And I got to tell you, I just looked at our statistics, and we have over 200,000 open downloads that I am so pleased to be talking about. 200,000 open downloads a week. That is how much information is needed about this topic, sexual addiction. And, I really work hard at, actually, getting the experts in the field to talk about what they know to be true about sexual addiction. Sometimes they contradict each other, and that's absolutely okay. People are allowed to have different belief systems about recovery and about how sexual addiction develops. But it is my job to disseminate that information to you, and then you pick. You decide what feels right. You decide after you do the research what you believe to be true. And from time to time, I will interview somebody who suffers from this disorder. It is not officially a disorder as in the DSM-5. It has not been recognized yet, although this year, for the first time, gambling was recognized as a disorder. Gambling that is compulsive, that's out of control, that creates havoc. So I know sexual addiction is just down the pike. I've told you all that we are pioneers in this field. Not that sexual addiction hasn't always been around, but very clearly with the Internet coming on the scene in the late 90s, people have watched this behavior, this compulsive behavior, escalate. Tonight, I'm going to be interviewing Dee. And Dee is a woman who suffers from sexual addiction. And she's been kind enough to agree to come on the show and talk about her struggles and her successes. So if you're a female sex addict, this is the show for you to hear about how she has undergone the tremendous struggle that occurs with female sex addicts and what she has done to become successful. She's worked very, very hard, and I can't wait to hear her story. She's an inspiration to many, many people. And I know that she is starting women's groups in the city that she lives in. So I am thrilled that Dee's going to be on the show to talk about what she has to deal with, and then hopefully she's going to share whether she feels her issues are different or the same as male sex addicts. Of course, that's subjective. That's only her opinion. And yet, very clearly, I see some differences therapeutically, and we're going to be talking about those too. And that, there aren't a lot of women that get on the internet and talk about what it's like to be a female sex addict. Now, interestingly enough, there can be a real bias about female sex addicts. I mean, one of the things that we know is that it probably is best when female sex addicts have their own group, separate from males. And in D-City, that is not always possible. And when it isn't possible, then you just do the best you can with what you got. And that's okay, too. However, Dee has been instrumental in setting up a situation where there are more meetings for female sex addicts. I encourage people in all areas of life to really work hard at starting meetings if their own city, county, country doesn't have them. Because my belief, my bias, the story I make up about this is that face-to-face is always better than telemeetings. Now, that doesn't mean I don't like telemeetings, and as a matter of fact, I think I will see if I can't solicit somebody to talk about what telemeetings are all about so that you'll understand. But in the meantime, I truly believe that when you can bond with other people, and you can do that face-to-face, you can be in the same room, you can meet before the group and after the group, that's always the most effective. And actually, I got to tell you that there's a lot of people that believe recovery groups are very, very helpful, but the real bonding is before the group even starts or after the group. I mean, one of the principles in the 12 steps is providing service to other people. And after the group, it can be very, very helpful to reach out to a person and say, hey, you said that you're getting a divorce, and let's go to dinner right now and talk about, your struggles, and let me offer you some support. That can't happen if you're doing telemeetings. Now, certainly you can say, hey, here's my number, and when you're having a hard time, please get with me. But it really helps when you're face-to-face and you're able to provide that kind of service or receive that kind of service. And that is why I cannot emphasize enough how important I believe it is to go to face-to-face meetings, which may mean you have to start it. Now, Bill W. from AA said you only need 2 people to start a meeting. So when I talk to one of my clients who has now moved to Florida, and he says, oh, my gosh, this meeting's so small, he's used to meetings that are 20, 30, 40 people strong here in Indianapolis. And he goes down to Florida, and believe it or not, there's only 4 to 6. And I say to him, hey, build it and they will come, Make sure that you have advertised within the SAA.org or the SA.org, and then talk about it with other people. I know there's a real stigma to doing that, but I can't emphasize enough that when you put your feelers out there and you talk about things, you very clearly find out that you're not alone. And unfortunately, people don't usually bring up this subject, and so it's so important to be able to do that just by kind of sharing maybe you're going to share about Tiger Woods, or maybe you're going to talk about David Duchovny. And when somebody says, yeah, that guy had so much money and availability, of course he'd be a sex addict, it's easy to say, real people have this disorder too. This is prevalent amongst all ages, sexes, socioeconomic groups. This is not just happens to the movie stars. And when you have that kind of dialogue, you find out that there are other people struggling with it. A great place to deal with that is your church, because very clearly groups like Celebrate Recovery allow you to come in, talk about what you're struggling with, and then you're experiencing a situation in a church environment where you might worry about what other people think, and then you realize everybody's there to share their need for recovery, whether that be alcohol recovery, drug recovery, gambling recovery, Overeaters Anonymous recovery, or sex addiction. So I encourage people to talk about it a little bit. I was just talking with a man who is in a small town in Virginia, and he said, I am too afraid that I would ruin my reputation. And I definitely understand that. So even though the closest meeting to his home is about an hour away, he says, wow, that gives me real anonymity, and I don't have to worry about running into my neighbor or the guy that bags my groceries at Kroger. And I think you can relate to that, too. There are some real pluses to traveling 30, 45 minutes, even an hour away. It can give you that sense of security. But I have never had anybody who's gone to a meeting and had it work against them. And you know what? I am so happy about that, because it should never work against you. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about tonight before Dee joins us on the call is, what do you do when you don't feel like your recovery tools are working? If you've lost your interest in 12-step groups and your sponsor isn't calling you back, and you feel like you've already read 8, 9, 10 books on recovery, and you're wondering if you'll ever get healthy, what do you do? Well, I'm here to tell you that you have to change your thinking. You have to retrain the brain to figure out what you can do to create more excitement and enthusiasm about your recovery program. Hopefully you're attending 12-step meetings. If you are, go to some new meetings. Meet some new people. If your sponsor isn't calling you back, you're not getting what you need, ask somebody else. I mean, literally, today I talked to somebody who said, I've already been through 7 or 8 sponsors. I said, well, go to some new meetings and check out some new people. We all, from time to time, get burnout on our exercise programs, on our recovery programs, on our day-to-day life. But it is up to us. Remember I talked about that coaching principle. We are all 100% responsible for our own behaviors. And to do that means that you have to figure out what you're going to do to rev up your own program and make it more exciting. And going to a new meeting that you've never been to is one of those things. Asking somebody to join you that either you've seen at a meeting but you haven't seen him since or her since, or asking somebody that you believe suffers with this issue to come to a meeting can oftentimes liven it up, can make it more meaningful, can give it more purpose, and that may be all you really need. The other thing is that although there's certainly a protocol that you need to follow, you can talk to the organization and see if perhaps you can't do a workshop that has to do with Drop the Rock, a book that is phenomenal for working the 4-step. Or, if your 12-step, the 12th step is the number one step that you're working on right now, asking a couple of people in the meetings if they wouldn't mind providing some service with you so that you're not all alone. So don't let your program become stale. Figure out what you need. And get with a certified sexual addictions therapist whenever possible to make that happen, because they've got the expertise to know what to do. All right. Well, as I promised you, I'm working diligently to provide you new information, and we have never had a female sex addict on the show. And so I'm going to reference her as Dee. And Dee has been courageous enough to come on and talk a little bit about her success and her struggles with the program, with her own issues. And hopefully what I know to be true is what you hear here on the program, you can apply in your own life. So, Dee, welcome to the Sex Help with Carol the Coach Show. How are you tonight?
I am well. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. How are you tonight, Carol?
Well, I also am doing well, and I was telling my listening audience before you joined us that really you're an inspiration because you have proven in your own community that when there aren't enough resources available, you and some of the other women get together and create them so that somebody can't say, oh, there's not a meeting for me. And so when I saw that happening, I said, okay, I got to get her on the show to talk a little bit about her life, hopefully as not only an inspiration for our listeners, but also to kind of educate them as to, what your life has been like and also your recovery. So where do you want to start?
I want to start wherever you want to start. I am open and available. I'm very grateful for the opportunity, and like I mentioned to you prior as we were getting ready for this, I am an open book, and I am willing to discuss any and all that you feel like can be discussed this evening.
Well, thank you so much. And before we get started, I want to share with our listening audience, because it's kind of like being in a meeting, Dee. Oftentimes we have to kind of curtail some of the graphic details because we don't want to stimulate anybody or set up that reward center so that all of a sudden their reward center is lighting up because it's reminding them of a lot of euphoric recall. But can you share with our listening audience where you think your sexual addiction began?
Absolutely. For me, I actually experienced sexual abuse as a very young girl. So I probably was around 5 or 6 years old when that switch was flipped for me. A friend of my family touched me inappropriately, had me do other things inappropriately with other children while he watched and things of that nature. And so for me, that kind of set up for me that this was okay. One thing, like I said, I was very young. So I never developed boundaries around my sexual expression. I've always known myself as a sexual being because I was introduced to it very early, but I never developed any boundaries. And as you mentioned, why we curtail what we speak about, because we can trigger that reward or, that part of the brain that thinks, oh, okay, this is okay. That part of my brain was introduced to me before I even knew what to do with it. And so I just took that and ran with it from there on until recently when I started getting help for this.
And how long ago was it that you decided that you needed some help?
Absolutely. Well, I've been a part of 12-step fellowship programming for close to 5 years, but specifically sexual addiction, it's getting help for sexual addiction, rather. It's been a little under a year. It'll be a year in September that I attended my first Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting.
And you really are in the book. We can talk about anything.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I certainly didn't let anybody know that you had contacted me, and I obviously look into some counseling and to help you stay on target. And I was initially very impressed because when you called me, you interviewed me. So can you share with our listeners how you interviewed me and what specifically you were looking for in a good certified sexual addictions therapist?
Absolutely. Well, something that was extremely important to me was someone that's dealt with minorities, because I am a member of a minority racial group, so I wanted someone that was comfortable with that kind of interaction. But I also wanted to work with someone who could deal with someone who had experienced childhood sexual trauma. I really am needing to work through some of that right now. And I have spoke with people who deal with adults who have experienced sexual trauma, or adults who are sex addicts and can't maintain monogamy and committed relationships and things of that nature. But it was important to me to work with someone who could help with the early childhood sexual trauma issues that I present with. So I remember saying some of that. I remember just asking, were you comfortable with 12-step fellowship stuff in general? I don't remember everything per se, but I know that was some of the criteria.
Well, absolutely. And initially, when you contacted me, obviously you said, I'd like to set up an appointment, but I have some questions first for you. And when I called you back, I remember the first thing you did ask was I comfortable working with minorities, especially with the African-American population? And
absolutely.
Yes, I had worked very closely with the African-American population. I didn't think that would be an issue, and you said to me that was really important to you because you felt like there had been times when maybe you worked with a therapist that either wasn't culturally sensitive enough or actually kind of offended you. So when I heard that you were starting an all-women's meeting, it was the very night that I interviewed a CSAT who was African-American herself, and she was disgruntled with the CSAT training. And she said, she said, I just don't feel like there's been enough cultural sensitivity or diversity done within the training. And so I shared my information with you. I said, I wish more clients were like Dee, who checks in with the therapist and asks if they're comfortable and gets a feeling for whether this is going to work, because that's assertiveness at its finest, and you did that. So I appreciated that about you, and I knew that you were a woman that was going to get more of your needs met because you weren't going to be passive. You were going to be assertive.
Wow, thank you for saying that. And that's trial and error, let me tell you. I had to go through some of those experiences that I went through in order to be able to be my own advocate in a lot of areas and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is what I'm bringing to the table. Can you meet me halfway here and work together in a therapeutic relationship to get some of what we both are looking for in the relationship? So that trial and error, absolutely.
But practice makes perfect, because I always tell clients, being assertive does not mean you get what you want, but at least you're clear about what you need, what you feel, and what you believe. And sometimes that in and of itself then generates the confidence to eventually get what you need, even if it's not with that first person, whether that be a therapist or a relationship.
Certainly.
So now
we're always interviewing.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to use the word absolutely. Now I want to ask you, because we have talked on this show about that sexual addiction either typically occurs from sexual trauma as a child, or becoming fixated by something that actually traumatizes the brain. We've got a lot of males and female listeners, and I've had a lot of clients who will see something at the age of 6, 7, or 8, whether it be a Playboy, a Playgirl, something on the computer, whatever, and that image imprints something in the brain that makes them so curious that they develop a compulsion to continue to look for that. And so you've already shared that for you it was sexual trauma. And I'm curious as to whether you were able to find a safe person early on in your development to talk about the molestation.
Actually, early on, I was not. And to tell you the truth, it took me beginning to work with a therapist probably at around age, I'd say I was probably about 22 or 23 years old, maybe 24 at the absolute oldest. And I was retelling the situation to this therapist, and she kind of sat up in her chair and looked at me and said, that's not an experience that everyone goes through. You were sexually abused. And I looked at this woman and I said, what? You know, because I thought that what happened to me was normal. I thought that happened to every child as they were developing. I thought it was play. I thought it was harmless. I thought that what I went through was the norm. And so when this therapist said that to me, you know, it shocked me to pieces. And I have to be honest, it probably was about a week or two more that I saw her before I ran. I didn't want to look at that stuff. I didn't know how to look at that stuff at that time. And so I never had a safe person to talk with about that early on. And I just recently, probably the last 2 or 3 years, have even started disclosing this. I just talked with my mom about this not even a year ago for the first time.
And may I ask, how did that go when you talked with your mother?
Absolutely. Well, initially, I kind of threw it out there. We were having a phone conversation, and I said, hey, this happened to me when I was a child. And she went to pieces, as you can expect someone who loves you and thought they were protecting you to do. She said, hey, I am so sorry this happened. I had no idea. And then later on, probably about 4 or 5 months later, we went to lunch together and talked a little more about it. And, you know, again, she was in tears, saying she was sorry she wasn't able to protect me from that happening to me, and how much she loves me and how sorry she was that occurred. And it's been a journey. It's been a journey.
Now, oftentimes, a child of sexual abuse will want to protect their parent from the pain of telling them. So I'm curious, when your mother was crying, which I feel is really appropriate, and she was so apologetic, which was very, very good, did you end up feeling at all guilty?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm very glad you touched on that, because there was this dual feeling inside of myself. I held a lot of anger towards my mom that happened to me. But at the same time, just like you said, as I saw my mom cry, I didn't want my mom to cry, and I wanted to diminish what happened to me and say, it wasn't that bad, or, you don't have to cry over this. It wasn't that bad. It happened 25 years ago. It's nothing to be concerned about. But I had to get over that as well, and I am having to go through a process and grieve what was taken from me as a child. And now I'm reclaiming it as an adult woman, and it has been quite a journey and process.
So how do you think that formed or shaped you? And then I'm going to ask you, how do you think it contributed to your sexual addiction?
Sure. I think it formed and shaped me because, like I mentioned earlier, I had no clue what healthy sexual expression or boundaries look like. And as I go back into the recesses of my mind, I've always been very lewd and sexually inappropriate in situations. I'd say things that were inappropriate or make jokes that were inappropriate or commentary that was inappropriate because I thought that was the norm. I have conducted myself in very unsafe ways early on in my becoming sexually active as a teenager and young adult. I have had unprotected encounters. I have met folks in bars and gone home with them, and it was all about the thrill of this. This is what I thought it meant to be sexually alive. I thought it meant to be with whoever I wanted to be with, however I wanted to be with, wherever I wanted to be with him. And so that really turned me into this person that has a huge fear of commitment. I have been one who was all about the chase. Once I acquired what it is that I was chasing, then I had no more interest in it. And now where I am working on developing an appreciation for monogamy and a committed relationship and being with one individual that I share myself with intimately. And that's definitely a new approach to life. And I find myself some days completely at a loss of how to do it. I have a sponsor in the fellowship. I go to meetings really regularly. I'm working the steps, etc. But there's some stuff that I don't know how to do. I'm having to be completely honest. I've never been in a monogamous relationship before, and I've been in relationships that were very long term, but I check out of them physically. by sleeping with someone else, by becoming emotionally unavailable, whatever it is that I do to not commit to the situation. So that's part of what's come about. And as far as the sex addiction goes, for me, it's the thrill. It was the thrill. And I'm also in another fellowship that addresses another addiction that I have. And the main addiction is more of whatever it is that gives me that feeling, that tingly sensation, that reward, that pleasure, more. I want more of it, whether it was alcohol, I want more of it. Whether it was a sexual experience, I want more of that. Whether it was food or drugs, I want more of that. So that's the ultimate addiction, more.
Okay, and that totally makes sense. So one is, what I heard you saying is when you were molested, it totally skewed what you believed your boundaries were as a kid and what was safe and what was right. And because it skewed that, you played that out as a teen or as a young adult, not really knowing what was important for your own sense of development. I mean, you really you went into that kind of, I enjoy being noticed, I enjoy the attention, I enjoy the thrill, I enjoy the sensation, and that became the predominant feeling.
Absolutely. And I was
a
beast
woman. So at what point do you believe, either as a child, as a teen, or as a young adult, that you began to realize this doesn't feel right, I think it's wrong, or it's not healthy, and you started paying attention to your intuition a bit?
Absolutely. I have one turning point that took place for me in undergrad. I was probably about 19 years old, and I remember myself having an encounter with someone and thinking afterwards, that didn't feel good. I don't feel good about myself. I want to take myself away from the entire deal, and I'm not going to be sexually active for a certain amount of time. And it was like this declaration that I made for myself. And what happened is I ended up meeting this guy on the Internet who I ended up being in a relationship with for almost 7 years, and took me right out of that whole mindset, because I was always looking for someone to validate me at that time. And he came around, and lo and behold, I jumped in that relationship, and I gave up on completely what I considered finding myself at that time, finding my sexual self and developing some boundaries. And so I didn't go back to that frame of mind until probably September, when I started attending Sex Addicts Anonymous, and I'm over 30 years old now. So, and what happened for me that drove me to that fellowship, I had an encounter with someone again, and it came up for me, I have absolutely no feeling. You know, there was feeling there on a physical stimulation level, but there was no emotional tie to this person. And after the situation was completed, I wanted them to leave me alone and leave me quickly. And I said, okay, there's a problem here. I don't have any feelings. I don't want anything from this person but this encounter, and then I want him gone. Okay,
and so then you started paying attention to the fact that you were ambivalent about what you were doing.
Yes. It became very clear to me, and I don't know why.
So how long did it take you to get the support you needed to begin developing those boundaries?
Well, I started attending meetings, like I said, in September of last year, and it's been a divine unfolding for me. I started going to meetings. Shortly after I started attending meetings, I got introduced to a guy who said, hey, look, we're going to be holding a book study group, and this book study group is going to be reading through a book called Healing the Shame That Binds by John Bradshaw. And I started going to that book study group. I was the only woman there, which was uncomfortable as can be initially. But I've developed very wonderful relationships with a lot of these guys that were there. They are like support people to the max for me. But I went to that support group, and at that support group I met my sponsor. And from there, working with my sponsor, he literally met with me once a week to check in because I wasn't going to work any steps initially. I said, hey, look, I'm just coming because I may have a problem. I'm not looking to work any steps or anything like that. But somehow I started working steps. I started showing up to that support group. I started adding more meetings. I started taking contact information. I started making calls and taking calls from people in the fellowship, and I got abstinent. I defined what abstinence means for me. I worked in the 3 circles. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a tool that's used in this Sex Acts Anonymous fellowship. I defined
and we've talked about it on this show, but just for any listeners that don't know, the 3 circles are an exercise that comes directly out of the Green Book that talks about the outer circle being healthy circle or behaviors, the inner. In the middle is the slippery slope behaviors. That might be looking at a catalog that has naked men or women. That might be getting on a chat line and looking at perusing and cruising Craigslist or some of the other websites. And then inner circle behaviors. Of course, all these are totally directed by one's own self and their sponsor, but that might be calling a prostitute, going home with somebody, being in a non-committed relationship, talking sexually inappropriately to other people. It just kind of depends. But those 3 circles really help to help the addict to know when they need to move away from that behavior.
Absolutely.
Now, what were some of your actual inner circle behaviors, your deal-breaking behaviors?
Right. Some of my deal-breaking behaviors are pornography. I cannot watch pornography. I consume it obsessively and compulsively, and that leads me to want to act out in other ways. So pornography is a no-go for me. Like you mentioned, having sexually charged conversations is a no-go for me. At this time, I'm not dating anyone exclusively or dating anyone at all, so having anyone in my place or being in anyone's place that I could be sexually attracted to is a no-go for me. I also have, and this is kind of cheeky, but not really, I have a bit of a curfew, a commitment that I made to myself and my sponsor. When I go out with someone that I'm interested in that way, I am generally home no later than 10 o'clock. And if it's a late night,
and you do that
I'm generally
because...
home. I do that because I understand that the later it gets in the evening, I'm spending time out with someone that I may be sexually attracted to. There's a good chance that I may try to push those boundaries and see where that could go, and so I take that off the table for myself.
So you set up, and we talk about this a lot on the show, you set up infrastructure that's going to help keep you honest and help keep you out of temptation.
Absolutely.
And one of those is curfew. And if you have your curfew, then you're not likely to be out till 2 or 3 o'clock at night, which, of course, is always a recipe for disaster for a sex addict.
Yes, and I don't do clubs.
Good job.
I don't do clubs for a lot of reasons.
Like. Yeah, exactly. So now let me ask you, because obviously your middle circle behaviors are not your deal-breaking behaviors, but they really are slippery slopes. So that curfew would be in your middle circle. I mean, staying out late would be middle circle behavior.
Absolutely. Staying out later than that curfew is middle circle. Having conversations with people that I have been intimate with in the past in unhealthy ways is in the middle circle. Like you said, looking through catalogs that may have some, sexually suggestive material in them, that's middle circle. Having some of the conversations, like I mentioned, sexually charged conversations are definitely they're right in that inner middle circle for me, because it's only so much talking I'm going to do before I want to start applying some action to what I'm talking about. So I have to be really careful about that.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about some healthy circle behaviors, because those are things that we want to expand on. What are some of yours?
For me, and I just got the biggest smile when you said that, because this program has helped me realize how much stuff I can do that's healthy and encourages healthy relationships with others. I put riding my bike in my outer circle. I love riding my bike, spending time with loved ones, friends, family, going out for lunch, dinner with someone that I care about or someone new that I'm just meeting. Reading a book, taking a bubble bath, watching a movie, holding hands with someone. And it doesn't always have to be something romantic. I hold hands with my niece. I love being out with my niece, spending time with my niece, going to a park. Things that are just wonderful that I would have never thought much about when I was in active addiction, because it was all about chasing that next high. Where am I going to get this next high, this next validation, this next bit of control? So my outer circle, it's just full of things. Like, I could actually pull it up for you. I keep a couple copies around me, so when I get a little itchy, bee, and twitchy, I go looking for my outer circle.
I would love that. If you're in front of the computer and you want to pull it up. And while you're pulling it up, can I ask you something? Because you said something somewhat controversial. And you said that you worked with a sponsor and you referenced him as being a he. And oftentimes in 12-step programs, they say sponsors have to be same-sex. So can you share a little bit about your reasoning and why you have a male sponsor?
Absolutely. I am bisexual, and it's still a little controversial. And honestly, when I first mentioned that I had a male sponsor, I got a couple of different looks about that. And my sponsor has a sponsor who he ran it by that he was going to work with me. And his sponsor ran it by his sponsor that he was going to work with me. And so we kind of cleared it amongst the ranks of friends that we run in that he's going to sponsor me, and it's been no problem. I see my sponsor as a sponsor. I have no attraction to him in any kind of way. He's a married man, and I respect that.
Well, very good. And then have you contemplated that your story or stories could be a sexual turn-on to him?
Actually, yes, and we have had conversations like that. And my sponsor is very good at saying to me, okay, Danielle, I just need the facts. You don't have to go into too much detail about it. And so I'll tell him what's going on, and he's very honest with me to say, hey, okay, that's enough, or I don't want to hear that, or maybe you should talk with another woman in the fellowship about that part of it, but we can work the steps on the situation. So
I love that.
Very
and so one of the things that I want to point out for, you just gave your name, Danielle. One of the things I want to point out is that Danielle is only responsible really for her behavior and her feelings. If her sponsor, male or female, was having difficulty with the issues and maybe set up some boundaries and still was having issues, that is that person's boundaries and issues to decide. It's not Danielle to figure out, oh, boy, I need to protect my sponsor. But you do need to be respectful of the boundaries that you have in your relationship. And what happens within your sponsorship also happens in the real world. So I bet it's kind of changed you in general to have a sponsor who says, okay, Danielle, that's enough. I don't need that. I just need the facts.
Yes, it has changed me. And what I think the biggest part of me that has changed is I see now that I can have very intimate relationships with men and not sleep with them. I have a very intimate relationship with my sponsor, and it's not sexually intimate in the least. And the thinking and none of it has anything to do with sexual deal, but it's very intimate. And I talk with this guy about a lot that goes on in my life. He knows a lot about family issues, things that hurt me, work issues, life issues in general. He supports me through them, but I don't have to do anything other than show up and let him support me and me be respectful of his program as well. And it's a fine, fine connection.
Well, and I would think that may be the first time ever you've had that kind of relationship with a male.
I agree. It is.
That's wonderful. Okay, so then you attend mixed meetings, and are you comfortable in that situation?
Yes, and I have to share a quick story with you about one time where I felt the most uncomfortable that I've ever felt since I've been a member of this fellowship. I was attending a meeting about 2 months ago. As we mentioned early in this discussion, I'm just getting to the point where I'm looking at childhood sexual trauma issues, and so I'm feeling like I don't have skin on my body around some of these issues because I'm very delicate and vulnerable. I was attending a meeting, and a guy introduced himself, and he started talking. He's an older fellow, and he says, what got me to the fellowship is that I molested my 7-year-old granddaughter. I lost my mind, and I had to leave. I didn't say anything to that guy. I never would say anything to that guy. But I literally saw myself leap across the table and wrap my hands around this man's neck, and I left. I had to leave this meeting, and I've never returned. I have never returned to that meeting because it triggered something in me. I had to make several calls after I left there. I had an emotional meltdown in the parking lot. I was very triggered, and I have not returned to that meeting since.
Yeah, I can understand why. I mean, clearly it was like you met your abuser, even though you didn't. That emotional connection was there.
Absolutely. And that's been the only time that I have felt uncomfortable in a mixed meeting. Other than that, I show up and, hey, look, I'm a sex addict, like the sex addict next to me, and next to me it doesn't matter what our gender is or whatever. We're all there for a common issue. I get support. I give support. I leave what's there behind when I leave there, and I take what I need with me. And it's been as simple as that.
Got it. So now, how are you different today since you are in a strong recovery group, 12-step program, obviously?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm different in a lot of ways, and there isn't even enough time to discuss it, honestly, and I feel grateful for that. But one thing, since we're on the topic of sexual expression, sex addiction, etc., I have come to appreciate myself as a sexual being that can function in a healthy way. Now, I'm not being sexual right now, and I have been sexually abstinent for, it'll be 6 months on the 20th of this month. And that's a commitment I made to my sponsor as well as myself. But I am coming to understand, and I heard this said by someone in a meeting, and I thought it was so profound that I've repeated it a lot since. He said a lot of what he does sexually and intimately has nothing to do with his genitals. I have come to understand that for myself. A lot of the romantic, intimate, sexual connections that I have with people that I really value have nothing to do with my genitals.
So when you say nothing to do with my genitals, explain a little bit further.
Absolutely. I think my concept of sexuality has always been warped and included some kind of compulsion, dysfunction, impulsiveness. Sexuality is God-given, at least I believe it to be, God-given and beautiful, and it's in all of us. And expressing myself in a sexual way does not have to involve intercourse. Being intimate with someone in a way that says, hey, look, I value you in this way, or even being romantic with someone does not have to involve sexual intercourse. This is something that I did not know. What I'm coming to understand is that I can show up in relationships to people that I'm interested in that way and have a conversation with them in a Starbucks or in a park and have conversations about meaningful stuff like family, work life. You know, what are your fears? What are your goals? What do you want to do in this life? How do you impact the world? This is stuff that really fuses, for me, this is stuff that really fuses together relationships that are worth my time. Oftentimes, I just led with what I could do physically. I'd show up the situation, hey, I can do this physically. You will want this from me. It was a control deal. I was manipulative, and it never went anywhere. And now I'm seeing some of the richest, robust relationships develop with people, and it has absolutely nothing to do with sex.
Well, how reassuring, and what new insight for you, because you were so sexually preoccupied before, you didn't have time to really look at those other areas. A, you weren't healthy enough, and B, let's face it, when you're practicing addict-like behavior, it steals time that you normally would spend on yourself, and just funnels it all into sex.
Absolutely. Well, you said it. Absolutely.
So obviously you are the new and improved, and you're really working on your entire self, not just your sexual self.
Sure, and I think that that's what's so beautiful about 12-step recovery. We can't keep it contained in one particular area of our life. When we start getting honest around the addictions that plague us and the afflictions that keep us down, all things start to improve. At least that's been my experience. I'm seeing restored relationships with family members that I thought I never would be able to have these loving connections with, that are open and honest and accepting and loving. I'm developing a deeper relationship with my own father, who I didn't talk to for many years. Not any meaningful conversation, at least, kind of breezed by, hey, how are you, every now and again. Now I talk with him pretty regularly, and we have a mutual respect for each other as father and daughter. And this is something I could never see coming to pass in my life prior to 12-step fellowship. And like I said, I have real connections with people now, and it's not about what they can give me, what I can get from them, how I can control them, how I can use them. It's a lot of the times about what I can give. And giving can be as simple as lending an ear to someone who has an issue. I show up and I listen more than I talk now. I live with purpose and intention, and I do it very imperfectly, of course, but I have a life now that I am proud of. I feel like I'm of value and of substance, and the value in the substance has nothing to do, again, with my physical way of going about conducting myself. It has nothing to do with sex, which was the end-all, be-all prior to this fellowship. It's like, if you're not having sex with me, you don't like me. If I'm not having sex, I'm not normal. If I'm not in the pursuit of sex, I'm bored and I'm not occupied. Now I find other ways to fill my time, like reading books or riding my bike or spending time with family members or going to church, whatever the case may be.
It really sounds like you have, again, increased your esteem 100-fold. You found real value in your life, and you're doing things that support that. You're in therapy. You've just started a women's meeting. Tell us what made you decide to start that women's meeting with another colleague.
Absolutely. Actually, I got asked to be a part of this. I have to give credit to, there are two other women who are also heading this meeting up. I have to give credit to them. One woman in particular and her sponsor, who's a male, who really stepped in and said, hey, look, this is my way of making an amends to women that I've harmed throughout the course of my active addiction. I want to help you women get this going. So we got together, put our heads together, and decided on the day, the place, the time, etc. And so I really got asked to be a part of something that I thought was phenomenal, and I committed my time and said, hey, look, I'll show up, I'll take the key, I'll do whatever needs to be done to make sure that this goes on every week.
Well, that's amazing. So they asked you to be a part of it, and you agreed, you volunteered, and, of course, that's all part of the 12 steps, too. And this man helped you to create that group as part of an amends to women in general?
Absolutely. He stepped up and said, hey, look, he said, I want this to go on. I want women to have a place where they can go and feel safe, because I know that there are lots of women who don't show up to the mixed meetings because they don't feel comfortable. So I want this to be a place where women can come and be comfortable. There is already a meeting that takes place once a month, but I'm really excited about the opportunity to have a weekly ongoing meeting where women can come, find fellowship, get familiar with each other, and show up and really talk about some of what's plaguing them. I'm excited about this. I'm thrilled, actually.
Oh, I would be too, and I just really believe that for some women, men can't be a part of their recovery circle because they don't feel safe enough. Maybe
Absolutely.
Because they have been molested, raped, or because they've been betrayed by men over and over and over again. So I'm thrilled that you're doing this and helping create this all-women's meeting. And again, I was just telling my listening audience before you got on that Bill W. in AA really only needs 2 people to start a 12-step group. Build it and they will come. And so it matters not how many you have at the beginning meetings. If you get it started, more than likely there will be people that will be joining you, and again, you'll be of service to others. So
Absolutely.
Good job at getting that thing started. It takes a lot of courage, I think, and a lot of, determination, because it really can be tough to find a meeting spot and ask for that. And, some places charge and other places don't. So did you find one that charged or one that didn't?
Well, I believe we make a small donation to the church, but I mentioned the gentleman who helped get it started. He actually has decided that he will put the cost until we actually start generating some money from the meeting.
Wow. All right. Very good. Now, as we begin to wind down, what would you say to our female sex addicts out there that are listening to you for the first time talk about your struggles, your recovery, your success in your 12-step fellowship? What would you say?
First, I would say thank you for allowing me this opportunity to have a platform and talk about what went on with me. I had no clue that my experience would be able to be shared, and other women may hear it and think, if she can do that, I can do it too and recover from what's hurting me. I can heal. I am not damaged. I am not broken. I can repair all that's been taken from me. Secondly,
you're very welcome. I appreciate your courage. Then what would you say?
Secondly, I would say, please come out and join us. Tomorrow is our inaugural meeting from 6 to 7 p.m. at Union Chapel Church, which is at 86 in Haverstick. Please join our meeting. We want all women who suffer from sex addiction or who may even think that they could possibly suffer from sex addiction. We'd like to have you out. And
all right, and that, of course, is for the Indianapolis listeners that are listening, because this show is all over the globe. So if there are female addicts that have been afraid to join a group, what would you say?
I would say the fear is normal. It is absolutely normal. I was completely fearful. I was terrified, honestly. But I walked in that first meeting and I found so much love and support that I haven't found a reason to stop going back.
All right. And that is real encouraging to a lot of listeners that are timid anyway, especially if you're female. There can be such a stigma to this illness until you get with other people, and then you realize that there's a lot of love and support in these groups. So I appreciate you getting on here and sharing your story, and I'd love to have you back and talk more in depth about what this woman's meeting was like, and more importantly, how your recovery's going.
Hey, I'm so appreciative, Carol. Thank you so much.
All right, you take care, have a great week, and keep up the wonderful work.
Thank you. You do the same.
Okay, I will. Thank you so much. Have a great week.
Bye. You too. Bye.
So as you can see, she is really an inspiration to others. I mean, this is a woman who has made it her mission to get healthy herself, and part of that 12-step program is that you help others once you begin to feel healthy. So we really appreciate her sharing her story, and we always want to hear what your story is, too. Now, as I said, at the end of every show, there will only be one of you, so fearlessly have the courage to be yourself. And feel free to email me at carolthecoach@AOL.com if you have a question or a situation that you would like to discuss. And you can always go to sexhelp.com to find a certified sexual addictions therapist in your area. If not, you can find one of us who Skypes and consults. We can set you up in the right direction. I've got several people on my caseload that I actually see on Skype and get them started in some recovery tools and telemeetings if there aren't meetings available to them. So don't give up. Support's out there for you. And we are all working in this world to make it a better place and to make us the best people possible. So have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Talk to you soon.